Okey-dokey, gonna call the meeting in order. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the May 10th, 2023 meeting at CB11's Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee. My name is Jason Villanueva, and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is being called to order at 6:35 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by our district manager, Angel Muscane, who is also the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear, and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relate your difficulty to the staff. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about the agenda and/or its topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated out loud on the record during this meeting. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized after the board members. Roll call, will now take attendance by roll call.
Committee members, when I call your name, please answer present. Devin Cronshaw.
Present.
Kenneth Crouch.
Excuse.
Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Jessica Morris. Nilsa Arama.
Present.
Beverly Pabon.
Shalom, present.
Vinny Torres. Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Candy Vivas Vasquez. You have quorum.
Thank you, Angel. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there's no objection, we'll adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Adoption of the meeting minutes. The meeting minutes from March were distributed to the committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes from that meeting. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the meeting minutes from the from the March committee meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB11 website. The meeting minutes of tonight's meetings are going to be taken by Beverly Pabon. Announcements. The next committee meeting for this committee is scheduled for June 14th, 2023. Do you have any other announcements? If not, we will move the agenda along. Thank you, Angel. Informational updates. Okie dokie, we'll push to presentations.
Jason, if I could just make a very brief announcement just to recognize that we're joined this, well, one that Jessica Morris just joined, so just so you're aware. Also, our intern Abigail Lieber is present in tonight's meeting, and George Daines, our planning consultant. And then one ask for the team from Mount Sinai. We have 3 Brad Beckstroms, and Brad's great, but he's not 3 people. So if you guys
Not
could
tonight
change,
anyway.
if you could change the name when you get a chance, I'd appreciate it. That's all.
Okay,
Thanks.
it should be Chris and Hillary are also on Angel.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that housekeeping, Angel. Presentations regarding land use application C230286 PPM and C230285 PQM dash at 244 East 106th Street, which is the Share NYC project. This is one of the projects that we were graceful enough to have the opportunity to see the ULURP to see the project pre-ULURP submission. So it's been a privilege coordinating with this developer and ensuring their transparency to the committee, as well as I've been advised that this developer has presented to other committees on the board. So that being said, the applicant is the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, who I understand presented at our full board last month with the developer Ascendant Neighborhood Development and the Alley Forney Center. The community board's 60-day review period began on April 5th, 2023, and is expected to be completed by June 5th, 2023. So again, just some housekeeping. We'll be having a brief discussion because we've pretty much had a mirage of presentations on this application. And then at that stage, we'll move to motion on our position as it relates to this ULURP. So if I have nothing else to be said, I'll turn it over to the presenter if they're here.
Yes, so I will be presenting. My name is James from HPD. I'll be kicking us off before I hand it on. All right, let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Yep. All right, great. So good evening, everyone. My name is James Chikov. I'm with the Manhattan Planning Team at the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development. With me tonight are my coworkers, Felipe Cortez, Agatha, and William, and members of the development team who will introduce themselves during the presentation or the Q&A. So as part of the ULURP process, we're excited to be here again, presenting the Share NYC project to you, the Land Use Committee of Community Board 11. And I'm particularly excited to be presenting here for the first time to CB11. So I'm looking forward to working together again in the future. So to kick us off, the Share NYC ULURP application was certified on Monday, March 27th of this year. The applicant is HPD, and the development team working with us in this project is Ascendant Neighborhood Development, as well as the Alley Forney Center. So Share NYC will be a new 10-story building containing approximately 32 rooming units and 1 building manager's unit. The proposed project will be developed under HPD's supportive housing loan program, and the units will be affordable to households or individuals earning incomes up to 60% of AMI. The proposed development will be located at 244 East 106th Street on block 1655, part of lot 29, which is currently privately owned and vacant. To facilitate the project, HPD is proposing the following land use actions, which is to the acquisition of the development site, which was previously city-owned land, and then disposition of the development site to the developer. So here's just a quick overview, overhead view for more context of the location. Again, on East 106th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenues, and adjacent to an existing building that's managed by Ascendant on the eastern part of the lot. So before handing it over to Chris Cirillo from Ascendant, I'd just like to say we're very excited to be working with the development team on the Share NYC project, as it'll create much needed affordable housing at a currently vacant and underutilized site. So I'm going to hand it over to the development team, who will give us an overview of the project.
Thanks, James. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm not sure there's anybody here who doesn't. My name is Chris Cirillo. I'm the Executive Director of Ascendant Neighborhood Development Corporation. We are a nonprofit affordable housing provider based in East Harlem. We are happy to be here this evening again with the Land Use Landmarks and Planning Committee to be at this stage of this project. As you know, we've done 2 complete briefings on this project to the Land Use Landmarks and Planning Committee previously. We've also done briefings for several other board committees during the pre-development period and the pre-ULURP period, as well as multiple committee meetings and briefings this month, which will wrap up next week. The project, as I believe you're aware, is a new 10-story new construction building. It is being developed under HPD's initiative, Share NYC, which started with a request for expressions of interest back in 2018. And so what we have proposed is a shared supportive housing project. So there will be 4 shared housing units in the proposed new building. Each of those shared housing units will be a duplex with 2 floors of the building. And each of those duplex shared units will have 8 rooming units for 8 individual residents. And that's how we get to the total of 32 rooming units in the building. Those duplexes will be spread over floors 3 through 10. The second floor will be occupied by office space that will be utilized by our development partner and service provider partner, the Ali Forney Center, for their 24/7 on-site staffing of the building. And the other portion of the second floor will be occupied by the live-in building manager. The ground floor will include the lobby, some mechanical space to be up and out of the flood zone because we are in an area that is a flood zone. So for resiliency requirements, we're going to be placing our mechanical equipment above the flood zone. And then the ground floor also includes a multi-purpose space to be available for residents. So the project's being financed through HPD's supportive housing loan program, as well as with low-income housing tax credits. Maximum income under those programs is 60% of AMI, but as supportive housing, most of the residents will be receiving rent subsidies, so their actual incomes are likely to be much below 60% of AMI. We have not, the development team has not yet selected a contractor, but as we have committed in the past, once we do have a contractor on board, we're happy to come back and meet with this committee and the Economic Development and Culture Committee, again, to talk about local hiring, and we'll obviously be meeting all of the requirements that HPD has for developers regarding local hiring and MWBE contracting. Next slide, James. Just a little bit more about the project. I already mentioned, due to its location, the building is being built to the most stringent HPD and zoning flood resiliency requirements, which includes elevating the ground floor. There's a view of the lobby on the top of the slide here. And at the bottom of the slide is a view of the multi-purpose room that'll be available for residents of the building for events, meetings, classes. Each of the shared housing units in the building will have laundry facilities available for residents, as well as study and workspace and large shared kitchens and multiple shared bathrooms. And the multi-purpose space on the ground floor will open out onto a landscape rear yard that will also be available for residents of the building. Next slide. So, this is where we are in the ULURP timeline. We are here with you this evening. The community board will be voting on the ULURP later this month. We expect to be before the borough president for his review in June of this year. We'll be then moving on to the City Planning Commission over the summer and to the City Council by late summer, early fall. So we anticipate ULURP completion by early fall of this year. Next slide. And just a little bit more on schedule. So assuming successful completion of ULURP in the fall, that will position our development team to be able to apply for the next HPD round of low-income housing tax credits. That's a competitive application process. It now occurs in the spring. So we would be applying in spring of 2024 for those tax credits. We'll find out by summer of 2024 if we have an allocation for this project. And assuming that we do, that would position us to be able to start construction on the project by late 2024. We anticipate an 18 to 24 month construction period. So that would lead to project completion sometime in 2026. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Excellent presentation. Any questions from the committee members? Jessica Morris and then Beverly Pavon.
Christopher and James and Felipe from HPD continuing to engage in this conversation. The goal is not only to build the building, but the Share NYC program is to put forward a new model or typology. Is that correct? That this, while it is an object and a place and 32 units that will do good work, the model for shared living is intended to be a case in point for being able to do more of this in the future. Is that and then my other more straightforward questions are, how wide is your lot and how tall is the building, and then possibly something, Jason, I'm not sure how it works when there's been presentations to multiple committees. Are we privy to the concerns or issues that were brought up in a synopsis format to consider when we're doing our work here coming from land use with those inputs from other board members? So is it a model? How wide and how tall, and how do we work internally? Thank you.
I take the first part, Chris, and then you can
Sure.
You can go through the second or third part. Good evening, everyone. I'm very glad to be here tonight with all of you, and thank you so much for hosting us again. Jessica, good to see you once again. To answer your question, it is an initiative that started with Mayor de Blasio, and we're continuing under this current administration. We are studying the possibility of expanding new opportunities for rooming housing opportunities, but as of now, as of now, it remains as an initiative for now. Hopefully this could be expanded, but for now we're seeing how these three Share NYC models projects move along, and we'll see what happens. Regarding the lot size, so lot 29 got divided in two portions, right? One is where the existing building is, and then you have the eastern portion would remain vacant. So we are looking to, if you look at the materials, this is lot 1655, part of lot 29. That's how we are dividing this. And if I'm not correct, if I'm not wrong, I believe the frontage of the vacant portion, I believe, is 27 feet wide by 100
feet deep. Yep.
There you go.
27
Thank
by
you.
100.
There you go. Thank you. And the building is going to reach, it's going to be a 10-story building with a maximum building height, I believe, of 99.9 feet.
Yes, all that's correct. So originally, before we acquired the adjacent building and this lot, there was a companion building. So our building at 242 East 106th Street, there was a mirror image building on this lot that was demolished at some point when it became too deteriorated. That was well before our ownership and before the site was transferred to us by HPD. So it was originally two lots. They were combined when we took ownership. And now what we're proposing to do is essentially divide out the lot again for this new site, the vacant lot, to facilitate, create a site for the new construction project. So it's 27 by 100 feet. The building is just under 100 feet. We technically could build more on the site, but the sliver law prevents the building from actually being taller than what we have proposed. So we are at the maximum height, even though there is a bit more floor area that would be available if we didn't have that height limit. And the third question, I'm sorry, Jessica, what was the third question?
It was more about for Jason, I think the
for Jason.
committee internally, how do we better understand the feedback that you've received? And it's not something that we necessarily need to spend time on if there are minutes or internal chair to chair discussions, so that those concerns can be considered when we do our work here. A cross committee collaboration point of question.
You definitely answered it right there. Thank you, Jessica. So yeah, we have a track for cross committee collaboration. On top of that, there's informal discussions up with the chair through telephone communications. It's kind of what I did today with the committee members. And then there's our formal process, which is they have every right and or opportunity to have submitted any questions, concerns, or clarifications in writing via email and or through resolution. To date, I have received none. So I have no concerns. I've received no concerns from board members through the committees and or constituents to date as it relates to this project. Beverly Pabon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you again, Chris, and everyone from HPD for coming to us again. My question is basically mostly towards the future of the development, since you don't have a development team yet, and the city is trying to push this carbon neutrality program. I want to know, have y'all put that in your development plan on how that will work for you guys, if it would cost you guys more in the future to make these changes? And I'll wait for your response.
Sure. So just to clarify, we are the development team. So Ascendant and Ali Forney are the development team. What we haven't selected yet is the contractor. We've been having conversations with a couple different general contractors, and now that the project is in the ULURP process, and we have a better sense of what the timeline is, we can kind of advance those conversations. So hopefully within the next couple of months, we will have selected a contractor from among the ones we've been talking to. So the building is, I should have mentioned, be meeting enterprise green community requirements. It will be an all electric building, as the city is moving towards requiring all new construction projects to eliminate the use of gas. So it has been planned as an all electric building. Given the size of the building and the size of the roof and the amount of mechanical equipment and rooms that we have to have up there, we are not likely to have solar on this building. We will have a green roof, but we won't have solar, just given the logistics. There isn't enough footprint to put it there. But we will be complying with all of the requirements for new construction in terms of electrification, energy efficiency, so all of that is baked into it. And then obviously I already referenced the resiliency requirements because it's in the flood zone. The ground floor is elevated, all the mechanical spaces will be elevated. So the building should be able to withstand, any future flooding events with minimal impact to resident quality of life, or, any sort of emergency situation. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Beverly. Angel, and then we're gonna proceed to action of taking a motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason and HPD team and Chris, Ascendant team. Although the other committees haven't forwarded their feedback to the committee chair, as Jason was explaining, I wonder if you could share briefly some of the feedback or some of the interesting points that you discussed with the other committees as you've been making your rounds across CB11 committees. And I want to also thank you for doing that. Not all developers do that, and we very much appreciate it. Sometimes, depending on the project, you kind of need a little bit more time to talk about specific aspects of a project. So having the opportunity to be able to do that and having a development team that is willing to do that and understands the importance of those conversations is very much appreciated. So if you could just share briefly some of the feedback that you may recall from those conversations, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, and I'll say thank you, first of all. for the opportunity to present it and to discuss it with all the different committees that, have some overlap or have an interest in learning more about it. I mean, it is a somewhat unique project in terms of the typology of the housing. And so, we're really excited about it. We think it is innovative and hopefully will be a model for future projects. So far in this latest round of meetings, we've presented to the Housing Committee, which unfortunately I was not able to attend, but members of the Ascendant team and HPD did attend, and also Human Services, Youth and Education, and then next week we'll be going to Economic Development and Culture. Yeah, I think that's everything. I think we've done everything but Environment and Open Space. So, I think obviously a lot of questions about income requirements and just the selection process for the future residents as a supportive housing project. It doesn't go through the HPD lottery. It's a different system of, selecting residents from the shelter system, because it's people who are experiencing homelessness or housing instability. So it's sort of the supportive housing loan program process is a bit different. There were questions in at least a couple of the committee meetings about, sort of permanent supportive housing for a project where the target population is young people. And so, as with all permanent supportive housing, people will have a lease for their, in this case, rooming unit. And although they have to qualify on age for, entry into the building being between 16 and 24, they don't get kicked out of the building, when they turn 25. It'll be their decision on when they decide to move out. Some questions about, well, what will happen and how will we assist residents who kind of do age out at a certain point and are interested and ready to move into more independent living. And obviously, as an affordable housing provider in the neighborhood, that's a goal that we have along with Ali Forney to have a continuum so that as people who eventually occupy this building, once it's up and running in 2026, and then whenever after that they decide to move out, if we can be helpful in making that transition for them and helping them find housing in the neighborhood, obviously that's something that we want to do. Some other questions about services that'll be provided, and Ali Forney wasn't able to attend all of the committee meetings, but they were able to attend some, as well as I believe the full board presentation. And obviously we've committed to coming back as the building does get into construction and as we get closer to lease up and operations, with more details about the, how exactly the building will be operated, how residents will be selected, how Ali Forney will manage the shared housing, which obviously prompted a lot of questions from folks to understand how to navigate potential concerns or issues that come up among residents who are sharing space in shared housing units. So I think those are the major ones that I recall, but we've been keeping a running list from all the questions that came up in the committees, ones that we answered during those meetings, as well as ones that we need to do more research on or get back to people with more detailed answers. We've also gotten some great recommendations of other folks and institutions in the neighborhood to reach out to about the project, to make sure that they're aware of it and to make connections and linkages to services that future residents might need. So I think it's been a really helpful process for us as a development team to, hear the concerns that people have, hear the suggestions, and hear some of the feedback about the building and how it's going to be operated. So.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris. Beverly?
Yes, thank you, Chris. You just made me remember something. I was at the housing meeting, and I know one of the concerns that we asked was the affordability, because they do get leases. And we was talking about how, this thing is coming up with the rent guideline boards and how much the increases was going to be for the houses. My question for that if the amounts of the leases go up, yearly, because you probably give them yearly leases, would would the residents also be able to apply for vouchers and stuff in order to help offset the rent increases for them to pay? Would that be something that will be implemented? Or it's already locked in because they got a 60% AMI? Is the
Hi, Beverly. This is Felipe again. Thank you again for raising that question. I was able to get a little more details on that. So I believe I mentioned that rent leases will increase no more than 2% annually. And I was told also that every tenant in the building will have a rent stabilized lease. In this particular project, all tenants will receive rental assistance, and no tenant and all the tenants will pay 30% of no more than 30% of their income towards rent. So those are the conditions that we know.
Okay, thank you so very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you all. That being said, I am open to taking a motion from the floor to either approve and or disapprove the project, possibly with conditions. Jessica, you have a question or you're making a motion?
I have a comment, but I'd like to also make a
You can
motion.
make it, go ahead.
The comment is, once, Chris, you have essentially a full house, how do we get future residents to consider board public membership or engaging in this activity with us? I think the pipeline, not just for this project, but for other projects, and maybe this is a seed of a question for HPD, as far as those who advance in the lottery and land in affordable housing, to make sure that a pipeline to communicating with their local community board and potentially considering service, because that perspective is incredibly valuable, having essentially won the lottery, right, in those various cases, but also to sort of understand how the proverbial sausage gets made in the types of projects that come down the pipeline when they're kind of experiencing further along. With that, to make a motion to support Ascendant Neighborhood Development and HPD's application for the Share NYC project.
Thank you, Jessica. Point of clarification before I take a second. Angel, this is an approval, right? Not a support?
Yeah, well, it's the
Okay.
same. Yeah.
I just would like to clear it up.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah,
usually we get the term
it's in
was better
favor, right,
support.
Jess? So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we're not opposed.
Yeah.
Good.
Understood.
We want this.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you, Jessica. Do I have a second?
Candy, second.
Candy, thank you.
Okay, members, when I call your name, well, tell me what your vote is. Forgot English for a second there. Devin Cronshaw. I didn't hear you, buddy. Say that again.
Yes.
Thank you, Devin. Kenneth. Jessica Elliott.
Yes.
Jessica Morris.
Yes.
Nilsa Orama.
Yes.
Beverly Pavon.
Yes.
Vinny Torres is not here. Jason Villanueva.
Yeah, yes.
And Candy Vivas Vasquez. O se oye, Candy.
Oh my,
And-
see, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
The motion carries.
Mhm.
And Angel, I think Vinny is logged on. He's the other Jason. I didn't know how to send him the link without the, that's my fault.
One second. I don't see another Jason. Oh, here we go. Jay, can you, Vinny, can you voice your vote? I'll call your name again. Vinny Torres? Not responding. The motion carries anyway. You're good.
Thank you, Angel.
You're welcome.
Congratulations, Ascendant and HPD. We look forward to seeing you on a follow-up to this project and the success of the program and your efforts. Appreciate your transparency and collaboration with the board.
Great. Thank you so much for your support. We really
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you all. That being said, we're going to move the agenda along. 7:10 p.m. presentation regarding the land use application N230113ZRY, City of Yes Carbon Neutrality Citywide Text Amendment. This is going to be a 20-minute presentation by Trevor Loritz of New York City Department of City Planning. The New York City Department of City Planning, in consultation with the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, is proposing a citywide zoning text amendment to implement changes to the city's zoning resolution to remove impediments to and expand opportunities for decarbonization projects within all zoning districts and across all 59 of the city's community districts. The community board 60-day period began on May 2nd, 2023, and must be completed by July 3rd, 2023. That being said, we have this opportunity. It's going to be a presentation, and then the hope is for us to have enough information to take a position by our next committee meeting. That being said, I'll turn it over to the presenter, Trevor, if he's present.
Yes, I am. Hi.
Thank you, Trevor.
Let me just share my screen. Okay, is that visible? Okay, well, thank you CB11 Land Use Committee for having us. I'm joined by Jose Trucios, who I'm sure you all know and love. He's our Upper Manhattan team lead, and I am relatively new to the agency, but been appointed as the liaison to your district. So I'm thrilled to be speaking with you tonight. It's my first board presentation, so please bear with me as I stumble through this. So as has already been mentioned, we're here to discuss City of Yes for carbon neutrality. This is an opportunity for us to update our zoning regulations to help meet the city's climate goals. So tonight we're going to take you through 4 goals, the 4 goals of this project, and outline 17 unique zoning changes that are in the citywide text amendment to better inform your full board vote on June 27th. At the end, we'll be happy to answer any questions to the extent that we're able to. And also feel free to drop your questions in the chat. So without further ado, City of Yes for carbon neutrality is the first of 3 projects that the Department of City Planning is developing as part of Mayor Adams' broader City of Yes initiative. This charges agencies to take a hard look at outdated regulations that are holding New Yorkers back from investing in their homes, businesses, and our city overall. The 2 other initiatives, zoning for economic opportunity and zoning for housing opportunities, will have further public engagement later this summer. These are distinct and independent proposals, so we want to give boards enough time to evaluate them on their own. But you can expect to see the referral package for zoning for economic opportunity this fall. The carbon neutrality text amendment that we're discussing tonight aims to deliver zoning relief to property owners who want to save on energy costs and reduce emissions through retrofits, but who might be facing difficulty with current zoning rules and regulations. But that being said, there's plenty here that will benefit everyone, owners and renters alike. We also want to note that City of Yes for carbon neutrality isn't the last word on sustainability. There will be sustainability components in the forthcoming zoning for economic opportunity and housing opportunity text amendments, in addition to all the great work that's being done by different agencies. So to begin, we just want to briefly frame our conversation about why we're even talking about carbon. I'm sure this isn't news to anyone present, but the ongoing climate emergency has largely been fueled by global CO2 emissions. The effects of this are, of course, deeply felt in East Harlem, both in increasing flood risk and increasing extreme heat events. Carbon dioxide makes up the vast majority of the United States greenhouse gas emissions. And 2005 was the highest year on record for New York City CO2 emissions. So the 80 by 50 policy initiative is to get New York's CO2 emissions to 20% of its 2005 levels by 2050. And just to clarify the terminology, We're going to be using the word decarbonization a lot. Generally speaking, this refers to the process of reducing greenhouse gas emissions produced by the combustion of fossil fuels. So when we talk about a carbon neutral city, we're talking about a New York in the future that has reduced its overall energy needs, cleaned the grid, and electrified all remaining energy needs. Obviously, a lot of this is beyond DCP's realm, but there's a big relationship between our buildings and the zoning laws that govern them. And as you can see in this graph, buildings are the greatest source of the city's carbon emissions. We want to note that this proposal is not in a vacuum. Rather, we're building off of previous work, both by the city and from other entities on this topic. Most notable for tonight is Zone Green. This was a 2012 zoning text amendment. It's been 10 years and we've taken stock of the outcomes of Zone Green and tweaked the proposals here in response, also factoring in advances in technology and the changing environmental landscape that we find ourselves in. We also want to highlight that the proposals here are the product of extensive community engagement and collaborations with organizations that are thought leaders in this topic, like the Urban Green Council and We Act. We understand that DCP has sometimes been criticized for not being transparent enough until public review. We've tried to do better in this effort. There's been 4 open to the public meetings over the past year, all of which Chair Gorodnik invited community board chairs to attend. So you're able to see here the array of organizations and institutions and agencies that we've been collaborating with. Throughout the engagement process, we've basically been asking 2 overarching questions. What can the city do to help achieve our collective climate goals? And how has zoning in particular hindered the advancement of these goals? So all this culminated in 17 zoning proposals to combat climate crisis that we're going to be quickly reviewing tonight. So DCP divided these into 4 goals or buckets. Number 1 involves decarbonizing our energy grid. 2, our building stock. 3, vehicles and transportation. And 4, waste streams. So goal 1, to decarbonize our energy grid. A bit of background first. By 2040, New York State is legally required to achieve 100% a 100% renewable energy grid. So to support this, the city is developing large amounts of offshore wind and bringing in more clean hydroelectric power from upstate Canada. The grid we have downstate, unlike the upstate grid, is pretty dirty and one directional. It relies disproportionately on fossil fuel burning, generating plants, usually located up the river. As things now, there's not enough renewable energy to go around to make a one-to-one switch from fossil fuel to renewable. So this transition is going to require a range of solutions, including putting all of our rooftops to work and for generating renewable energy across the city. New York City still has a long way to go. In 2016, in terms of rooftop solar, it set the goal of producing 1,000 megawatts of rooftop solar across the city by 2030. As of right now, we're currently at 300 to 400 megawatts, which means we have 7 years to go to more than double the amount of solar to meet this goal. So here are the 5 proposals in this goal. So to switch to offshore wind and rooftop solar, it's going to require the development of essentially what's a new decentralized grid with production and storage sites scattered across the city. The proposals you see here are designed to help with this new grid into place. Solar and wind are on the production side, and increasing allowances for building batteries to act as the glue or energy storage nodes of this future grid is on the storage side. So first, we are taking a fresh look at our rooftop zoning allowances. In R6 districts currently and above, there's a 25% maximum coverage limits on rooftops for solar with a 6-foot setback requirement. Obviously, this reduces the efficiency of solar. It also doesn't make these projects pencil in a lot of cases. What might be one of the most impactful proposals that we're discussing tonight is allowing 100% rooftop solar coverage with no setback. Second is maximizing the solar potential of surface parking lots, of which there are a number in East Harlem. The city has over 8,000 acres of surface parking, and we think that solar canopies should be over every single one of them. The third proposal is aimed at facilitating community solar, which allows certain sites to generate power that can be used by customers in the surrounding area. One such installation I want to highlight in East Harlem is at NYCHA's Carver Houses. This was implemented in collaboration with WEACT. Zoning currently defines this as a commercial use because it involves the sale of solar electricity, which prevents its widespread adoption. But we believe in the agency, and this proposal outlines that there are large residential campuses such as NYCHA campuses, hospitals, schools, and colleges that are in residential districts where community solar could be a great fit. And so the proposal is aimed at facilitating the expansion of community solar. Fourth, we need to ensure that there are safe FDNY and DOB reviewed storage facilities located where they needed most. Energy storage and large rooftop batteries like the one you see here in the Barclays Center are not currently allowed in residential districts. But a key component of the decentralized grid is placing energy at the point of consumption. So consequently, zoning needs to be updated to add specific rules that allow for energy storage in residential districts. The fifth and final proposal of this goal relates to onshore wind. Currently, it faces strict height limits in today's zoning without a relief valve, so to speak. This proposal creates a tool essentially so that applicants can submit applications for taller onshore wind turbines that are subject to public review by the City Planning Commission. Just to be clear, this proposal will not change current height restrictions on wind turbines, but rather gives the option of public reviews for higher facilities where they might be appropriate. The second goal that we're discussing tonight involves the decarbonization of our building stock. It's estimated that of the city's 1 million plus buildings, 90% are still going to be here in 2050. And as we already discussed, these account for the largest share of the city's CO2 emissions, which is why it's imperative to facilitate the retrofit of these structures. That includes replacing gas and oil-powered furnaces with new electric systems such as heat pump, and through retrofitting exterior walls. At this point, we also want to highlight 2 recent laws that I'm sure most everyone here is familiar with. Local Law 97 in particular, and I think it was touched on earlier in this meeting, will begin to impose fines on large buildings, which are defined as in excess of 25,000 square feet, if owners don't cut their carbon emissions, beginning in 2024, with fines ratcheting it up every subsequent year. The second is Local Law 154, which requires, and this was also touched on, all new buildings to be electrified from the start, essentially banning fossil fuel hookups in all new constructions. These laws taken together sort of represent the existing enforcement mechanisms for carbon neutrality. And what we're outlining here is aimed at supporting compliance and making it easier for building owners to comply with the new legislative landscape. So the 3 zoning proposals aimed at supporting the decarbonization of buildings. The first is the electrification retrofits and physical screens for rooftop mechanicals. New efficient electric equipment like heat pumps, which can't be placed in basement or cellars, have to be on rooftops. And the proposal here is to waive the zoning height limits on building rooftops for heat pumps and new electrical equipment, in addition to adding new screening requirements, which will also have the added bonus of screening some unsightly HVAC equipment that already exists that doesn't have a screening requirement. The second is allowing envelope retrofits to meet code. I think a good example in East Harlem is the recladding that's ongoing at 1295 Fifth Avenue. Zoning needs to ensure that owners who'd like to upgrade insulation or reclad their buildings aren't running into zoning obstacles. The third promotes envelopes that perform better than code. So this is revisiting 2012 Zone Green and sort of learning from the lessons of Zone Green. One was the wall thickness deduction. It awards a small amount of additional floor area than better than code buildings. This proposal is essentially going to update the text to ensure that this bonus continues to reflect the latest energy code and best practices. And I think it's important to touch on funding. Obviously, this work can be very expensive, if not cost prohibitive, but there are billions of dollars at the federal, state, and municipal level to support it. In particular, we want to draw your attention to the New York City Accelerator, which is run by the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. It's a great resource for connecting homeowners with technical advice on implementation and connecting them to financing options. The third goal that we're going to touch on is decarbonizing our vehicles. The context here is that we know widespread EV adoption is coming down the pipe. Albany's already indicated that by 2035, all new vehicles sold in the state will need to be zero emission. So these proposals are essentially aimed at aiding the facilitating the adoption of this technology by increasing the city's overall charging capacity. And of course, a carbon-free future isn't just about cars. The zoning proposals we're about to touch on also address other forms of transit. The city firmly believes that the more trips that can be taken by bike, scooter, foot, or transit are better for people's health and the city's environment. So towards that end, City of ES for Carbon Neutrality supports vehicle and transit decarbonization goals through 5 zoning proposals. The first is we can allow commercial charging facilities in all commercial and manufacturing districts. These, what you see here, is sometimes referred to as the gas station of the future, and it's currently prohibited in about half the city's commercial districts. Second is to allow building owners to designate a portion of their existing parking spaces as public EV charger sharing spaces. These rules aren't anything new in essence, because since 2007, 20% of private car parking spaces have the option to use as car share. This is essentially increasing flexibility to allow the use for EV charging as well. And the third proposal is to allow for more flexible use along the same lines of non-residential public parking lots, parking garages, and commercial accessory parking facilities by allowing car rental, car sharing, and commercial vehicle storage and public EV charging within these facilities as well. Fourth, expand special rules that allow for indoor automated parking facilities to be available for everyone citywide. These facilities are generally much more efficient with space. They're more effective than your traditional parking garage. And right now they're only allowed within the Manhattan core, which East Harlem is not technically part of. This is going to extend the implementation of these facilities citywide. Fifth is to update parking rules to boost public bike parking and allow parking facilities in bike parking facilities in commercial districts. The fourth and final goal that we're going to be touching on tonight is decarbonizing our waste streams to reduce the city's stormwater and solid waste. Zoning is admittedly not a great tool to address these, but there are some things we can do to help our sister agencies in their efforts to reduce the carbon emissions that are associated with organic waste and stormwater runoff. The first is to promote the adoption of permeable paving. This is a great way of paving surfaces because it allows rain to drain directly into the ground where it lands, which in turn reduces stormwater runoff. And that means less water on the streets and less water that has to be treated at energy-intensive wastewater treatment plants. The proposal here really just clarifies the language in the zoning text to communicate that permeable paving is always allowed, as you know, ambiguity around the text has sometimes frustrated the adoption of porous paving. The second is to update zoning's street tree requirements to allow for a broader range of new prototypes, including connected tree beds, rain gardens, bioswales, and other sort of innovative street tree pits that reduce stormwater runoff. The third is compost, and believe it or not, compost is never actually mentioned in the zoning resolution. 45% of the city's waste stream is organic material that doesn't need to go into landfill. I'm sure this isn't new to anyone, but the text amendment will add specific rules clarifying where these uses are allowed and to help facilitate the wider adoption of compost. The fourth and final zoning proposal that we're going to be touching on tonight concerns rooftop greenhouses in non-residential districts. So this was first permitted in 2012 as a zone green, but it required certification from the CPC chair. And this is a somewhat expensive and complex process. And as a result, only 2 greenhouses of this nature have been built over the last 10 years. So the proposal is to streamline this requirement by allowing the DOB to review applications for building permits for rooftop greenhouses. So that should cut costs, simplify the process, and allow more people to grow food on rooftops. So this concludes our overview of the 17 specific zoning changes in City of Yes for carbon neutrality. Overall, we believe these proposals will support the decarbonization of New York and keep our city green, healthy, and equitable for the years to come. We're just going to quickly review the timeline and next steps and then open the floor up to some questions. So as a citywide zoning text amendment, the review process will continue for the next several months. Currently, all the community boards, all 59, are reviewing this proposal, along with borough boards and borough presidents. In July, as was mentioned before, the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on the changes. In August, the commission will vote on approving or modifying the proposal, and then it will be passed on to City Council. City Council has 50 days to ultimately adopt the zoning changes and enact it into law. So overall, the timeline runs from now until October. So this concludes our presentation on City of Yes for carbon neutrality. We'd be happy to turn the floor over now to the committee for questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Before we go to the board, I'd like to turn it over to our land use consultant, George James.
Great. Okay, thanks. Trevor, good to meet you. I'm glad to see you here. I do have some questions, but before I get into the questions, which are going to be mostly about solar, because I think that this is the biggest change that people will see in their neighborhood. A lot of these other things are going to be under the hood or going to be relatively small. I think if this works as you hope it will, we're going to see a lot more solar panels around. And I just want to start by explaining to folks that currently you could do solar in New York City everywhere. Commercial solar can be only in commercial districts though. And in residential districts, it has to be accessory. It has to be accessory to the use on the lot currently. And so, you know, that's generally speaking, accessory solar is good because it benefits the people on the lot. And so you could see, you know, lower utility bills for the buildings and for the tenants when you have accessory systems serving the buildings. But as you pointed out, it's limited in size. You can't cover your entire roof like you can what you're showing here. It's also limited in height. And so you don't actually see that much solar. You see it actually on big commercial and industrial buildings in New York City, usually accessory as well, but not so much on residential buildings because of these rules. And so I think a lot of the locations and size stuff addresses, you know, the fact that you don't have that much. But the one thing that I think is an important change that I'd like to just make certain that folks understand is that solar is being changed to a use group 4 from use group 6, which is, that means it's changing from a commercial use to a community facility use. And if it's a community facility use, that means it can be located in residential districts. And it could actually be located in residential districts and be directly hooked up into the power grid. It doesn't necessarily have to serve the building on the zoning lot. So it can still, of course, you can develop accessory systems, but you can also develop systems that you know, essentially where the landlord uses the space on the lot to generate power, to generate income for from selling it to Con Ed or for other purposes. It's also not only a permitted obstruction, 100% permitted obstruction on rooftops, but it's going to be a permitted obstruction in open space. So if you have open space on your yard, my read of it is that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jose and Trevor, is that it's a 25% permitted obstructions in rear yards, but in open space, there doesn't have that limitation. So there is it's permitted obstruction in open space. So if you have, something like, a tower in the park, Franklin Plaza, let's say, right? Franklin Plaza is a big full block tower in the park development. You can have solar panels everywhere, right? You can have it all over 100% your open space. You can have it all over 100% your rooftop. And the way it's designed now, I think, is that power could be sold to the power company and not benefit anybody on that lot. Is that right?
Well, you made some great clarifying points, George. I do want to emphasize that this proposal, specifically on rooftop solar, it can be sold, and this is towards the broader aim of the new decentralized grid, just in view of the scarcity of renewable energy that's currently produced within the city. It's essentially an imperative that we put the rooftops to work and find new ways to increase the city's renewable energy production in order to meet these goals. So if it can be sold to Con Ed, yes, and I think it can. It's with the ongoing climate crisis in mind. We do recognize that this is probably the most transformative proposal that we've outlined today in terms of its effect on the built environment. It's unclear what exactly that will look like from the street level will vary depending on what block you're on, and we can't speak to that with 100% confidence. You can already find solar panels in East Harlem along Tito Puente Way, but if we're being fully honest and transparent, it will probably change the look of the city from the street level. Not everybody is going to adopt it. There's not going to be 100% solar coverage in all instances, but it does create the option for the adoption of 100% rooftop solar canopies. And it might just be a question of a new normal that we adopt to. I can't speak with complete confidence to some of the other points you've made. Maybe you can, Jose. Otherwise, we're going to circulate these with the authors of this text amendment.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Trevor, about it's imperative. But another thing that we've been hearing from DCP and our neighbors, and it's generally people talking about it, is that there is a housing crisis. And one of the reasons that there is a housing crisis is the cost of housing. And the cost of housing includes utilities. And so if you're living in a rental and your landlord decides to monetize your open space and rooftop to sell to Con Ed and not benefit you, well, that's a problem. I just can't see, it's about who it benefits. It's even an environmental justice issue, if I may. It's like, if you see the solar panels there and they're not benefiting you in any direct way, how is that just? And I think, there's a risk. There is a real risk, and maybe not today because a lot of these the sites aren't big enough to really be commercially, juicy for a lot of folks. But think about a time at some point when the commercial uses, or the potential commercial use, really competes with an accessory use. An accessory use is what we want. I mean, I think that's because that gets you all of the carbon benefits and the tenancy or reduction in the utilities that they pay, right? And so the last thing I think we want is to essentially just essentially subsidize Con Ed, and we pay for that through our electric bills. And I just think that, you know, there just needs to be a careful look at this
Sure.
so that it doesn't end up competing with the accessory uses.
I mean, our understanding is that none of these costs will be passed down to the tenants as far as solar installation goes. On the housing questions that you've raised, there's a really robust set of proposals that we're going to be outlining in the months ahead in zoning for housing opportunity. But I would also just want to reframe it. I don't see it as a giveaway to Con Edison. I see it as a collective responsibility to embrace renewable energy. And you make valid points. And Jose, I don't know if you want to chime in on any of them, but I would just want to frame it in that context.
Can I continue, Jason, or you want to take other comments?
You could continue.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, Trevor, about, you know, we got to do everything we can. But one thing that I have to point this out is that I don't think New York City is doing everything it can on this. You know, one of the things that that strikes me as a real missed opportunity is that, you know, New York City controls 1,900 square miles of land in the Hudson River Valley where they have space for the watershed. And there are solar panels going up all over the watershed in the valley right now. They're sprouting like mushrooms. And the only place we're not seeing them is on New York City watershed land. It's the only place. I have an application on my desk right here, across the street from the Croton watershed, or Croton Reservoir. And it's on privately owned land there. And it's just, it's like left hand, right hand. You know, you're doing at DCP everything you can to make these changes in the city, in a dense urban environment, where we're going to consciously make a decision to say that people don't need sunlight in their open space. Whereas we leave an area vastly larger than the city of New York with no solar panels at all. And I'm not uncertain. I don't understand it. I don't, you know, I think that you know, people actually do need sunlight. I think you're saying, well,
I do want to say there was an EAS and it did evaluate the open space category and determined no significant adverse impact in terms of
so
open space.
100% permitted obstruction in open space.
We're gonna have to look more into the potential impacts of on light and shadow that you raise. According to the EAS, this is not going to be a category that's significantly impacted. I can't speak to the local land use regulations upstate that might be constraining the adoption of solar panels on city-owned land in the watershed. If it has not been investigated, you raise a great point. But as we mentioned earlier, this is only one part of the solution. Bringing in renewable energy from upstate, from Canada, from various sources is part of this proposal, but it's a no stone left unturned proposal. But your point's well taken, and we're gonna regroup with the authors and come back to you with a comprehensive response on that point.
Yeah, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I was taking a little bit long because I was digging through the actual text amendment to be able to provide an accurate answer on open space. I was unable to find specifics in terms of the location on it. What I find is, you know, in terms of the bonus, not a bonus, but the kind of like the calculation of the increased floor area that you get or the height of the building versus the reduction in open space. It's a component of the analysis, as you mentioned, George, you know, when you are, you know, increasing this, the higher, so there will be some, you know, reduction of the light and air situation. But it was, as Trevor has mentioned, was deemed not to be considering an adverse impact in the environmental assessment statement. But I definitely will follow up with our, you know, carbon neutrality experts. And thankfully, this text amendment, as Trevor mentioned earlier, doesn't get voted until July 3rd. So, you know, we'll have an opportunity to come back to the board on June, on your June meeting with these answers. You know, that's what I was asking, to please put the questions in the chat so we can, you know, take a record of that and distribute that with our experts to come back.
I'll take it a step further for all of us. George and board members, as stated, let's draft our questions and let's formally submit it to them. Because I would like a formal response from DCP on the concerns that we're talking about. Yes, this process is formal, but we would like something in writing. So then that way, when we're making our decision of whether or not to approve and or disapprove this amendment with our conditions, that that we address and direct our concerns accordingly. Does that sound like a plan, George?
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
And the same will go, I know Jessica, I've seen your concerns, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna, Jessica, if you could give me a question, Elliot, then Jessica Morius. We'll ask each a question and then we'll move the agenda along on this item, but as you can hear, DCP, there are a lot of concerns. Not necessarily, and our district is probably one of the most densest districts within the 5 boroughs with the buildings, and there's a lot of concerns as it relates to open space and how, just to call it as it is, as we stated to a previous presenter, we don't want the wolf in the sheep's clothing, that it looks all good and this is just an opportunity to get the next group of billionaires rich, while those of us who are poor are suffering for their benefit. So Jessica Elliott, then Jessica Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. I just wanted to put my questions in the chat, but Trevor, you did a great job. Congratulations on your new position, and it was a great presentation, so thank you. George pretty much led me into my first question. I was thinking more about the experience of, someone in a lot adjacent more than people's experience on their own lots. So thank you for bringing that up, George. But what amount of say do adjacent people who might have windows that look out to would be essentially permanent scaffolding, and how is that handled? Second question was just about the I know streets aren't necessarily part of zoning, but you mentioned permeable pavement, and I'm just wondering if you all have looked into the allowance for like cisterns, bioswales, and other water storage methods. And if that could be brought into the streetscape, that would solve a lot of problems also. And the last one is just, I know, safety isn't your job, but I think a lot of the reason why I don't ride a bike in the city is because it feels unsafe to me and there's not a usable bike lane. So in order to, get that to work, I think we need to have like cross-agency collaboration. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
Go, Trevor.
Oh, sure. I'm sure you can speak to this more eloquently than I can, but as going in reverse on your third question, absolutely agree about multimodal transit and bike lanes. That's not in DCP's remit. That's DOT that controls the streets, but it is, as we mentioned before, an interagency collaboration, just the zoning piece of this broader effort to facilitate multimodal transit and other ways of combating CO2 emissions. The DOT has a robust bike lane and greenway program that's currently being rolled out. We can get back to you more with what the details of their plans are, but I can assure you that it's very much a city priority. For the second question, the text on tree pits and tree plantings, it's intended to allow for a broader range of prototypes, and that does include bioswales, rain gardens, and other great innovative methods of collecting rain and stormwater runoff that aren't explicitly mentioned in the current zoning text. First one's a bit more difficult. We can't speak to any certainty how people in adjacent lots might experience the solar panels from their windows, say. I would want to say that in our existing built environment, there's a whole array of stuff that goes on at the rooftops, HVAC equipment, other sort of things that we're not, necessarily cognizant of. I can't say with any degree of certainty what departure this might be from that. Jose, maybe you have some idea, but I think it's a great point, and it's one we're going to formally get back to you with, as Jason mentioned.
Yeah, and the text for specifically the location of windows and the minimum space requirement, hasn't been modified. So the existing regulations between R1 to R10 remain, and there is a specific disclosure for like, small lots. So those remain. I noting that there is also the, there is a particular, sorry, I'm trying to read what the screening of the location of for the equipment in open spaces or in roof that has been modified to allow the 25% to 50% movement, but no in terms of where the windows are located. What I will say, the text is about 163 pages, but it's very easy to read because, it's a lot of things that are being added, right? And it's struck down. And there's a lot of things that are also in terms of clarifying, definitions. For example, there was about cars and motors, and now this is called an automobile or something related to that, to, be encompassing of electric vehicles and all the type of motor, situations. So like the text is very easy to read. So that's what I'm doing right now. As you guys are, sending you questions and trying to do some quick search on these things and find that information. But we'll come back with the specifics. I don't want to give you a half answer on this, but I'm taking this. We're taking these notes, and it's good to continue to hear more of the concerns. I see more hands raised. So thank you, Jason, and everybody in the committee.
Thank you, gentlemen. As stated, we will be submitting this formally, so I expect the response at least 2 weeks in advance of our next committee meeting. Jessica, Morris, Beverly, let's keep it a one question apiece, please, and response, and then we're gonna, before 7:55, we're moving on to the next presentation.
Right now it's 7:51. Thank you, Jason. My question, and starting the rollout, 59 community boards and sharing this information is not a small task. If you're starting with us, I think I sit as a member of Community Board 11, and in this capacity represent the locality and the concerns here. I also wear a hat at AIA New York, and I think there are broader concerns, considerations there. I think generally the imperative of doing this is important relative to the local concern. If this is a place where you're starting, I think the resistance that is coming up, and Jason, there is a question at the end of just a comment, and I think the only question in your presentation is funding ? And I think NYC Accelerator is a great tool, but especially in low income communities where vulnerability and distrust, concern about unintended consequences, things that, George brought up, even though feasibility studies in solar arrays, that's a part of the process. So it's dollars spent, and there aren't going to be dollars spent where it doesn't make sense to capture energy. So, George, that's another consideration that I think is also a part of, what makes things feasible. I think what DCP is putting here is allowance. How though, and this is the question, in a place like East Harlem where, market values don't necessarily allow for some of these nice to haves, a new development and retrofits where we have housing, buildings, warehoused, disused, essentially abandoned, not invested in. How, are we going to be able to reap the benefits of, and this is to George's question, the hyper local? It's great to consider solar as a community facility use, but if it doesn't actually get implemented that way throughout in places because of some of the abusive tendencies of market conditions, being able to extract from places where there's ownership and not necessarily responsibility to pay it forward directly locally first, and then extra goes to Con Edison and the grid for some cost add. I don't know if that's DCP's purview, but the Mayor's Office of Climate Environmental Justice and WEACT partnerships, I think maybe those concerns about potential risks for low-income communities relative to supports like the New York City Accelerator. How do we make sure that those incentives or potential subsidies in these investments in existing assets and new construction can be front-loaded in places like ours to make sure that we get benefits too and aren't just effectively extracted from with no stake in ownership or potential community benefit? That's not a technical question. It's more of a process kind of concern. And I don't know if your partners in getting to this point, which there has been an incredible amount of work, if it's, tied to some Plan NYC implementation points that happen locally, how can you assure us that this is all great and good, but it's expensive? Is it going to happen here? And are our neighbors going to be able to benefit from this decarbonization in the same way that other places may see direct benefits? I don't know there's a quick answer. If the question's not clear, please let me know. And Jason, I'm happy to put that in the chat in some sort of succinct way. Thank you.
Yes, yes, please do that. I mean, I think it's a conceptual question on this, and I think one of the answers that we can provide now is we are updating the zoning to, as the previous zoning text amendments that we came to you with open restaurants, with the physical cultural establishments that do not reflect the current, present of our community of New York City. Is the same what is happening in this case with, the carbon neutrality tax amendment. One of the things that I want to say, there is steps that not just DCP, but the whole state and the whole city is taking with local 92, 94, local law 38, and all of these things that are, pushing new construction to be compliant. This is also taking a step farther for the specific things of retrofitting the buildings that, account for the 68% of the carbon emissions and all of the, the harm that can cause. I mean, I am part of I've been working with Community Board 11 for some time now and reading the community district needs and all of the different, surveys that the Department of Health has put together. So we are trying to do our best on putting together what, our experts have worked on this. I personally haven't worked on the draft of the tax amendment, so I cannot say that this is, my best work, but I have confidence in the people who have worked on this. I know they have been involvement with the Department, Transportation, Health, DNY, and they have put together a proposal that is, comprehensive for the zoning resolution itself. There are other moving pieces, as you mentioned, the funding. There are other, different agencies and state, entities that will be working on this. I want to ask, our team internally if there is a list of partners or resources that's being provided for boards that we can distribute. But thank you for that question.
And if I could just add to that real quickly, and bearing in mind, we will give you a formal response for all of this, Jason, as per your requests. But as you mentioned, Jessica, WeAct has been an active partner in this process. They're a great advocate for environmental justice concerns. I'd like to think that the proposal is grounded in an equity lens. And if you look at the community solar installation at NYCHA's Carver houses, that's a great instance of how this is actually being put to use for equitable ends. But towards your other concerns, we'll follow up with a formal written response.
Thank you, Jessica. Great questions. Beverly.
Yes, thank you guys for the presentation. Thank you, Chair. I'm hearing a lot, and I applaud my co-members for the questions they asked, especially George about who this would benefit and stuff like that. And for right now, I don't see any legislative laws that's coming up that would protect the cost that will probably be incurred by the residents and the people who have to use this, have no other choice but to use just electricity for everything. But I'm wondering what other options have the DCP looked at regarding, I see you're dealing with the the solar system, solar panels and everything like. But have you ever thought about any plans to help remove the CO2 out of the air? I came across a video regarding something called direct air capture. And it has a plant that they have in Huntsville, Alabama, which tries that's working to extract the CO2 out of the air. And I want to know whether or not the DCP has heard of this or looked at another alternative, not to just have buildings retrofitted and we use more electricity panels and electricity cars, but trying to take the CO2 out of the air and the technology that's coming up with that.
I'm going to speak out of turn and say, wow, Beverly, I'm floored and thank you. Sorry, Chair.
If you want me to jump in, Jose, fantastic point, Beverly. Point well taken. Carbon capture is not something that would really be addressed in the zoning resolution. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jose. That would probably be on DEP or other agencies to implement that. I can't speak specifically to what they're doing towards that end. Maybe you have a better idea, Jose. But again, this is something we're going to reach out to the authors about and get their formal response and circulate to you.
And some
Right,
questions, I'm sorry to interrupt, but some questions are comments, they're recommendations to the
Yeah,
authors,
absolutely.
right? They're asking for our input, so, and I agree with Jessica, I think that's a great idea. So, sorry, but go ahead, Jose, and then we're gonna close this up. We're a little over
Yeah.
on time.
I think, was it Beverly who asked the question?
Yes.
Oh, who made the comment? Oh, thank you, Beverly, because that is something that we definitely will pass along to our office. I just wanted to say, although we're focusing a little bit on the solar panel discussion and the retrofitting, the proposal does also, talk about decarbonization at large. And, it's talking about waste management, improvement, and other aspects that we haven't, get into all the weeds on here. I think, that the biggest thing here or the big concerns that we're hearing are actually the built environment in respect to the installation of mechanical equipment. But there are, the storm water management component that is being, also added to the zone resolution change in terms of definition or so to be more applicable and apply to new buildings or so. So there is more into the text that is being considered, not just the electrification and retrofitting. But thank you for making that point because we could emphasize those things a little more.
Yeah, because my concern is also with the, the electrifying everything. We still, until the carbon has been decreased and we have less carbon in the air, we still have these bad storms. And even though you're having these buildings, these things put on top of buildings or at least a second level within a building like the project on 106th Street where they're gonna, the equipment is not in the basement. For those that are, blackouts, and I'm very much concerned about blackouts that we would have in electric panels of Con Edison or whoever supplying the electricity goes out, because now you'll have no gas stoves. That's going to be a very, very hardship on people that when blackout happens, you can't cook, because you have no alternatives. And this is what I'm concerned about. There is no other alternatives being implemented or looked at or presented, and that we just relying only on one way of doing things. And I have a concern. And and I'm not want to tell my age, but I remember they had to break up Bell because Bell had a monopoly on everything, and I don't want this to happen with electricity and to bring down the CO2 carbon, whatever terms are used for us, but we have no other alternatives. And so that would put people at the mercies of big businesses and big corporations and people who would benefit more than we would, and it'll be on our backs. And I think other alternatives should be looked at within New York City.
Thank you. We'll note that. Thank you very much.
That being said, thank you, DCP, for your presentation. I think you did a phenomenal job in working and collaborating with us. And as committed, we've put most of our concerns in writing, but I will ensure and reach out to the committees as well as George, our consultant, to get something to you guys by the end of this week with an anticipation of you getting us a formal response 2 weeks prior. I think it will assist if you have some of these other organizations that you're cross collaborating with, the other administrative agencies, DOT, FDNY, Con Edison, right? Everybody's telling you their concerns about the grid and what Con Ed can do. And I don't disagree. We don't, this is, we're charting uncharted waters, right? So it's the more information and data that we can acquire, the better. And I could only imagine once we start having the environmental justice discussion, concerns with, emissions from those panels and the crossing. So it's just the more information that you're able to obtain and acquire, the easier it is. I shouldn't say easier because none of this stuff is easy, but the more informed we are, so we can make a concise and decisive decision. So,
I just wanted to make one last note. This application and this proposal also includes the racial equity report within the package that you guys can find online. There is, an acknowledgement. I know it's easier said than done. It was said before that, like we're selling things under a candy wrap that are not like fully explored, but at least there's a recognition of, the need in Harlem and especially in the Bronx and Upper Manhattan and all the area has been noted in the racial equity report. I'll ask the committee to take a look at that and if there are specific questions, but that is also a component of this application.
excellent. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Trevor. Appreciate your service.
Thank you, guys.
You all.
Thank you, board members, for your patience and professionalism. That saying, we'll switch to our next, we'll move the agenda along. It's 8:06. We're a little over on time, but again, another friendly neighborhood developer in our district, Mount Sinai, that we tend to be familiar with. So that being said, the presentation is regarding the BSA application, CAL 89785BZ, Mount Sinai Kleinston Clinical Center. The application requests an amendment to a previously granted special permit and variance in order to renovate the existing Kleinston Clinical Center for an expanded oncology program. The application would allow an increase in the degree of non-complying lot coverage pursuant to an amendment to the variance and setback pursuant to an amendment to the special permit. The project will be at Mount Sinai's Hospital and ICANN School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, 440-68 Madison Avenue, 2-20 East 101st Street, zip code 1180-1198, Fifth Avenue, block 1604, lot 6, 13, and 17. Prior to handing over to the presenters, just as letting the board know, I will be recusing myself. I'll be present, not voting. I will chair. I'll be a part of the discussion, but I will not be voting on this application.
Jason, just wanted to add something that the slide should not read presentation. It's a continuing committee discussion. This was presented to the committee, as you recall, last month. So it's a committee discussion and a vote this evening.
Excellent. Thank you.
But Sinai is present to answer any questions the committee may have.
So I'll rescind the presentation comment and we'll go right into questions and or concerns from the board members. Jessica Morris.
Thanks, Jason. I think it was a great presentation last week and a good discussion. I think I was really blown away by how much Mount Sinai contributes economically and as a committed institution within East Harlem. That was really wonderful to see and to start with. I would only add a point of consideration that I brought up when you reached out today is that at every opportunity we get, even though this is a relatively small ask as far as, what is outside of what's allowable. And it's in line with the climate based efforts that we just heard about very much. So would be to, assert that continuing to work as a good neighbor, particularly with regard to public realm considerations along Madison and especially across Madison with Carver, our NYCHA neighbors, always in consideration, not as a construction nuisance mitigation concern, but more as a kind of a permeability of the campus and understanding that that stretch is pretty relentless and kind of either one side or the other side, which has to do with the nature of the two super blocks next to each other. So in taking our position in regard to the proposal, I think we always have the option whether we're approving or disapproving to add conditions. And so, wherever we land on that, I think, the opportunity to sort of add a condition that continued exchange and consideration always be made is, where we can exercise our voice in that respect. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I take that comment as a condition and question. Maybe Brad, you want to speak to Jessica's comment of how Mount Sinai interacts with the public and or Carver, and then after that, I think we can take a position unless there's any other concerns.
Jason, before we turn it over, I might just also say, understanding completely that the scope of this project is limited to the scope of this project, and it is not about anything beyond that necessarily, other than the facade is a sort of picture and it's a face to the community. And I think this is a very generous and uplifting one as it was presented, but that there's always opportunity to nudge, encourage, suggest, and invite more engagement and extension across the street and beyond. Sorry to interject.
And I think, Jessica, it's Brad. I think you said it perfectly. Obviously, there's always more to do. And we are willing to work with the board. We're willing to work with any of our neighbors, certainly including Carver, to really make what I call make East Harlem a better place to live and work. We do that through a number of things. We talked about some of the data. Obviously, a lot of that is about jobs. It's about spending money, dollars in the community. But there's also a lot of healthcare things that we can do, and that's where we can partner with you and others to try to promote better lifestyles. So 100% willing to partner on that.
Thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Angel, I believe we have a cab with Mount Sinai, correct?
Correct. There is a Mount Sinai Hospital CAB, a community advisory board.
Okay.
And actually Candy sits on our community advisory board. So, over time, we've had a number of individuals from CB11 participate on our board.
Excellent. All right, thank you, Brad. And again, Jessica, it's in your right if you do want to present that as a condition. It's there, but I just thought it would be good to have that context of some of the efforts that we're familiar with Mount Sinai. Jessica Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm ready to make a motion. I don't necessarily think it needs a condition. That's okay with everyone. Jessica, do you feel strongly about it?
I do a bit. I think it's an opportunity and to use our voice and understanding that we're both on the same team. I think whenever you can confirm that.
So what will do that?
Again and again, it's a reminder. Of course, it's not. Do I feel strongly about it? Yes, I do.
Okay, then I think I would prefer if you made the motion.
Seeing no other questions, Jessica Morris, would you like to make?
Sure. So a motion to support the land use application from Mount Sinai Klingenstein Clinical Center for Board of Standard Appeals application with the, so to support or approve, right? We're approving with the condition that continued ongoing engagement that encourages neighborly activities. I'm not sure what the right wording is. Is this something we need to?
No, Jessica, just when you get a chance, copy and paste your text to me and Angel, and we'll manage the wording. I don't think it will hold the board hostage as this is being recorded. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Yes, so that is the motion.
Do we have a second? Jessica Elliott,
Second,
Angel, could you take the roll, please? Vote count. Thank you.
Devin Cronshaw,
Yes.
Jessica Elliott,
yes.
Jessica Morris,
Yes.
Nelson Rama,
Yes.
Beverly Pabon,
Yes.
Vinnie Torres,
President not voting.
Jason Villanueva,
President not voting.
Candy Vivas Vasquez,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Mount Sinai. Thank you, committee
Thank you,
members.
everybody. Look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you, Brad. All right, we're moving right along. No new business. The new business we'll talk about next month unless any other members have some. Beverly,
I was trying to raise my hand earlier regarding the presentation before this last one. There was I just want to let the board know that in March, they have on a video, March, what's the date? Hold on, let me tell you the date. March 20th of 2023, there was a city presentation on the carbonization issue that we just had. And I think it's a good piece of information to look at. It's about maybe 2.5 to 3 hours long, but it has some great points that that would help us in this deliberation. And
a link for that, Beverly? Like, or we'll talk offline.
yeah,
if
I'll
you
talk
could get
about
me the
it, send it
link,
to you.
and then
Yeah,
we'll send it to the whole committee. Thank you.
Yes.
I think that's a great idea.
okay.
Jessica Morris.
Thank you. Just a note and a comment. There was an exchange. I came across a groundbreaking that happened in Brooklyn, a partnership with New York City Health and Hospitals and a housing development. They gave, I'm not sure what the exact terms were, but land in support of supportive housing next to one of their campuses. And there's a short 1-minute video that I'm happy to share in the chat that really states Health and Hospitals' commitment to developing healthy housing through an initiative called Housing for Health. It's something that I just want to raise awareness about amongst our committee, the Land Use Committee, because Metropolitan has a significant number of assets that are essentially underutilized in our district, and we have a housing crisis. That being said, funding is always a question mark, but the more we know about what institutions are interested in supporting generally, the more we can advocate for that good work to happen more broadly. So I'll put the link in the chat, and I'm not sure if maybe Angel has something to add, or maybe not, but it's not new business other than it's
Informational, thank you.
Yes.
And honestly, it has created some new business because I'm interested in the activity with the board and the cabs. which are our community advisory boards, where you know, these organizations that we have been dealing with probably prior to my birth have provided opportunity for us to place members on their boards that I think would assist in a lot of the concern with cross communication and collaboration. So I do want to applaud you on you noting some of the concerns that you have brought up, because it's at the bare minimum, it's making my clock tick at the executive level to request some information and get some clarity on how we can coordinate some of these issues that aren't necessarily being driven by land use, but are definitely affecting our community as a whole. Angel.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jessica, for mentioning that. I think it's a good example of why it's important for members to understand their responsibility, the opportunity and then responsibility of sharing information that they're coming across back to the body. I wanted to comment, if you'll allow me, Jason, and I'll try to be brief. But like Jessica expressed, we have a housing crisis. We have an affordability crisis, and we have a homelessness crisis. And this community board's known that for a very long time and taken several positions supporting developments and actions to address all of those areas. It's been disheartening to me to hear commentary amongst board members and in the community particularly, expressing opposition to any projects that include supportive housing. These are populations being served by supportive housing are those often most in need. So to hear from one side of certain people's faces that we want to help everyone, and then when the project is before them, coming out of the other side of their face and saying, oh yeah, no, but not here. This idea of oversaturation being their justification for opposing projects that contain supportive housing, that contain services that are much needed by many people. This has been really front of mind for me for months, and particularly front of mind after the events of last week, where the gentleman lost his life on the train. There are a bunch of our neighbors that are dealing with all kinds of challenges. And amongst those challenges are mental health challenges. And would this person or persons like him, persons experiencing the same things as him, have some stability at the very least in terms of where to live and how they live? I can only imagine that if it doesn't improve their lot, it certainly makes their lot easier or not as hard. So then to hear people come to our community board, to East Harlem, people that either are ignorant willfully or because they won't bother to get information about the history of this neighborhood. This has been a working class neighborhood the whole time. The whole time. Paint the people whatever color you want. And, you know, amongst those working people, often are people dealing with challenges. And it's been through their efforts and the intervention of government many times, and programs and unions and the like, that they've been able to get a foothold, and then from that foothold be able to build their lives into something. So I just felt compelled, and I'm sorry to editorialize, but I felt compelled to speak on this point because I've been hearing what I feel is entirely too much opposition to something that I think is utterly necessary. I've heard and I've learned at this community board what the struggles are of our neighbors in East Harlem for now 13 years. And to hear someone come and say, well, no, we don't need any more supports. We didn't need any more programs, kind of I have to resist it in a public meeting, but my reaction is emotional. And it's almost like I want to say, well, then get the hell out of here. Because the fact is that we're struggling, but we're struggling forward. And what you're doing, what you're proposing is to make our struggle even harder. So I just wanted to share that we have this wonderful project that you voted on this evening, supportive housing to help a population that really needs it. We're going to see another project in the coming months that, you know, proposes even more units of supportive housing to help people, even more people that need it. And I think it's important for us to be honest in our conversations and challenge those that for their own comfort, for their own convenience, want to put forward ideas and attitudes that are counter to the chances and the benefits of people in our community. That their opposition is presenting obstacles to people that already have more than enough damn obstacles. And if they're living a life of privilege, then they should shut the hell up and leave, because people that don't have those privileges don't have that option. That's it. I'm going to stop. Thank you, Jason, for allowing me to editorialize a little bit.
Thank you, Angel. I think you said a lot of what's on most of our mind that serve this board and or in this committee. Jessica Morris.
Just a response, and it's a question about how the board can, you know, asserts itself and conducts business in taking positions. Supportive housing is a very specific, functional, particular thing that is different than straight affordable housing, that is different than housing, that is different than other separate types of services. And there's something unique about it, Angel, in why it works and why it's opposed often. Is there, you know, there was a position taken and a resolution drafted on a moratorium. What is the, what are the grounds on which a board asserts a position? Does it need a kind of an instigating kind of moment, or is there a sort of a point in time when you say this place, this community supports these types of activities because? And I think those whereas statements are so powerful when you find that story to tell through the language of really reinforcing what matters. So hearing from you, but also seeing that, you know, we work together and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without you. But, you know, as a body, you know, we sometimes have to do the work, is kind of asserting a position on something like supportive housing generally, essentially a value statement about what matters here as a point of support for dollars and funding and programs and consideration where those things are always scarce. I don't know there's an answer. Maybe it's a question for the chair, and when it's appropriate to find opportunity to take those positions and
We actually, I think it's a simple answer and complicated conversation and questions, but the answer is simple: housing. The housing committee, and the housing committee has a lot of work that needs to be done to address a lot of the concerns, and of course the efforts of everyone in the board. It's no, you know, it takes a village, right? So you know, it's good to have this space, to have these moments, this time to have the conversation, and then it sparks that thought. I need not say that you guys know I'm very vocal, so I have no issue bringing any of this at the executive level to engage having those complex equations of a conversation that, again, you know, district needs does it for years. And, you know, and a lot of people that are speaking, you've all been involved and a part of it. And it's been our number one issue. It continues to be our number one issue since I've been a board member. And it'll probably be a number one issue when I'm done with my my term this year. So, you know, the fight won't stop. The work needs to continue, and we have to continue to do advisory. Doesn't necessarily just mean providing advice. It also talks towards advocacy. So I already have an interest of having a conversation with both the housing chair and the chair of the board as it relates to some items that aren't necessarily being addressed in the housing committee that are rolling over into this committee. But we need to, you know, utilize the resources that we have in hand. So then that way we could continue to push for more resources that we're not necessarily informed about that we need. So that way we don't get caught up in the sauce with, you know, terminological diversification and manipulation, right? So the mindset is we need more housing, and it's been the conversation, and is the reason why we tend to look at certain projects a little bit more favorably than others. We'll continue to have that mindset until, you know, the mission of the organization as a whole decides to change. So,
Jason, would you permit me just to
Yes,
respond to
yes,
Jessica's
yes.
question? So, as always, you all can opine whenever you want to, right? And that's the wonderful thing about, you know, the voice that everyone's allowed to have at a community board. The position of supporting those most in need has been a consistent position of the board for a long time. What I've also learned is that sometimes you have to remind people, right? So it's been our position consistently since I've been working here. But sometimes people want to act like they don't know. If people have read our statement over the years, certainly in there. If people have read the affordable housing development section of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, definitely there. If people have read our budget request, absolutely there. But, you know, people read things and they read into it what they want, or they choose to ignore things. And that's why, thankfully, all of us have voices to remind them, right? Because those that are really well off in our neighborhood never come to the community board office. And those that are most challenged often come to the community board office, or to union settlement, or to the block association, or to ECI, because they need help. So any of us that have worked in any of those places, or know people that work in those places, we hear this all the time. I need help, I need help, I need help, I need help. So it's something that we carry around in our minds. So then to hear people say, oh no, well, not here, I'm like, you're misunderstanding the neighborhood that you are in. We have all kinds of people. We're very diverse, economically even. But, you know, those of us that are struggling economically or challenged in other ways, you know, need that assistance. And those of us that can lend our voices to helping them, I think, have an obligation to do that. So that's a long answer to your question. But yes, before, now, and forever until it's fixed, we have to keep knocking on that door.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Jessica. Great discussion, and I definitely want to continue that conversation. If we can move the agenda along, old business, I have an item, the rolling action item list, aka the rail, still in development, but definitely made a lot of headway. I have to give a lot of kudos to Beverly that continues to assist me in those efforts, and Jessica Elliott in providing the skeleton for it, right? The whole form. And what's one of the biggest thoughts that I came in drafting this and starting to work on it is not necessarily the projects we're working on and the actions that we need to take, but it's something that we're going to push come June, right? And really look to get into activation by our September meeting. And that's to follow up on the things we've approved, right? There's a lot of ULIPs that came through this committee over the course of the last 2 years, let alone 5 years. And a lot of projects have went up, some have stalled. It's time to see where these developers are and where they've been and where they're at with the commitments that they made to this board, right? We'll use the focal point of the committee to have that conversation, but I do think it should be a cross collaboration with committees such as housing, which has been a big mantra of the conversation for this meeting for the last few hours. And then even furthermore with economic development, right? You hear a lot about job placements, you hear a lot about MWE participation. Unfortunately, I don't hear enough of it by the residents or constituents in our district. And those that are familiar with me will know I work hand in hand in ensuring that people within our community get jobs and opportunities within the corporate world. So, you know, passion of minds, I would definitely push those of you that are interested to get involved. But more importantly, for land use, we need to have these developers come back that made commitments, that got approvals, and pretty much report and hold them accountable to the commitments that they have made. So that's my old business on the rolling action item list. Jessica Morris. see you
Yes,
again,
I
Liz.
do have a piece of old business. I just want to voice on the record. Especially Jason, in your absence last month, with regard to the ECF project, and the question that I asked was with regard to how much change invalidates the ULURP. Essentially, it comes down to, in my understanding, a discretionary consideration by the Department of City Planning whether the project meets with substantial compliance. And so where there are things that are changing ultimately, and where the Department of City Planning will, where things are changing, 1, 2, the developer is going to want to do everything they can to maintain substantial compliance and not invalidate the ULURP, right? That's in their best interest. And 3, Department of City Planning is going to be in conversation about what meets that threshold of being compliant if things have changed. If not enough has changed, then it's a moot issue. But if things are changing and there's a dialogue between agency on our behalf, representing, is that a channel of communication that, we should have open? We've spoken with ECF and they're in good faith partners with the community board in seeing through their commitments in the process. That being said, I think, that discretionary kind of decision of substantial compliance is something that remains a kind of a question of what does that mean? And, is there any involvement of the community board in sort of assessing that at what point in the process, and do we ever hear about it or not? So that's just, kind of what I gathered. And I think it's whole business, substantial compliance, and wanting to definitely make sure that city planning is aware that we care as much as we do about the things that we care about in their considerations, whatever legality that does or does not have. And George has a.
So there's 2, before I go to George, just to give some, because this has been a headhunt for myself since I've been chair. 1, we haven't had HPD and DCP presenting at this committee for quite some time. As those have been a part of this process since I became chair, now they're here every month. I'm adding that to connect it to a bigger part, which is the district consultations that are coming up this summer that are going to have that conversation about accountability. But let's take it a step further. I don't need DCP and HPD or MIB to go to the DOE and express to the Department of Education what's going on with this contractual deal of you providing this space to ECF and ECF now providing this space to Avalon, which is still supposed to be city and or state or federal owned property. That conversation is 100% on track to be had. It's being expressed publicly here because there's no secrets. But furthermore, I have to take a position of that's okay to inquire to know what our options are. But let's take a stance of today, our developer, and particularly our city administrative agency, ECF, has attested that the only change in that project is the cost, and that they need to figure out how to get the financial resources. We drilled them hard, and drilling mean we held them accountable to the commitments they made. They stated that they were going to fulfill the commitments. They even went back and said that they're going to maintain their commitments. They're having issues with finance. So the last time they met with us back in December, they were going to go back, do their financial assessment and homework. We already, as leadership of this, and when I say we, it's me and Angel. So when you do send the email to land use, that just so those of you know, land use is Jason and Angel, and George are going to make a request from ECF to see where they're at and provide a project update. I don't know before George, if you want to speak to that, if Angel, I don't know if we got anything out of Jennifer from ECF, but I know that they have been willing, ready, and able to communicate and coordinate with us when we request them to come on site.
All right, I was playing with my dog. No, we haven't. we haven't heard back from ECF since the last time they were here. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so that said, that's a follow-up I'll deal with Jessica for land use. And then the other points that you made, which are great questions, I think is an ample opportunity for the board to be busy over the summer and activate these agencies. Tertiary to that, I mean, we could just ask DCP direct. I know that a lot of this stuff is new for them in their managing and handling, but again, that's my opinion. I really want to coordinate with the parties that are liable and responsible, which in this case is the Department of Education, which I'm coordinating such efforts with David Giordani from Youth and Education. George.
Yeah, I was just going to say, right after Jennifer came the first time, we did have a conversation with legal staff at the Department of City Planning. And they were, when they talked about, substantial changes, it was really about additional zoning waivers. And unless there were additional zoning waivers, it wouldn't reopen Bueller. But I encourage you, Jessica, and really the board as much as possible, is to, don't get hung up on those types of details, and just get people in to discuss the project. And if you have issues, like if you were told one thing during the Bueller process, like, that Marx Brothers Playground wasn't a park, right? And then it became a park later after the process. It's something that you can discuss and bring into the agencies. And the project's changed. And if you're unhappy with that, get them to come in, talk to you. If it's ECF or if it's DCP or any other agency that's willing to come in and express, you can express your thoughts.
I just wanted to add, George, you did reach out to me with questions about this specific project. We aren't able to provide more details because we haven't heard from ECF also. So in terms of like what the project will change, we are not able to say in terms, what will the next course of action be here. But definitely, we will encourage, and we talked to when we talked to Jennifer about a year ago, we did mention that we need to come back to the community board, even if the project was still under the approval and there was no further modifications or waivers to be had for an update in this project. So we haven't heard. I haven't reached out also, but I will and see where we're standing on that.
There you go. Thank you, DCP. Thank you, Jessica, George. Great discussion. If I don't see any other old business, we're pushing, it's 8:45. Do we have any other comments from our beautiful community board members? I'm gonna keep asking Angel till somebody gives, no. Ask her, take the roll call, Angel. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your time, your patience.
Okay, good job, guys. That was a very packed agenda and you didn't go over time, which is appreciated by me. Devin,
Present.
Jessica E,
Present.
Jessica M,
Here.
Nelsa,
She's
Beverly,
excused, sorry.
Beverly,
Yes, sure, yeah, present.
what?
I'm
Vinny,
sorry.
Presente.
Epa, Villanueva,
Present.
and Candida Vasquez.
Present.
You have quorum.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned at 8:45 PM.
Wow, good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Great work,
everybody.
team.
Shalom, shalom.
Appreciate it.
Salato.
Good
Good
night.
night. And Jason and Angel, we expect your comments or the questions to send to us. Do you want us to follow up
Yes,
by next
Jose.
week or something?
It would be great,
Okay.
honestly. Thank you. And
So,
if you could
thanks.
also follow through on what George was, if we could ask Jennifer again or yourself to look at some of that stuff for ECF, it would be great.
Yeah, I'll also
And
make
all
sure
the-
to follow up.
and
Thank you.
alternatives.